Today we do the first ever Marketing Monday Outtakes. This is where I take the research I did for Marketing Monday that wasn't used in Marketing Monday and talk about it. The best way to start this stream, I think, is to watch last week's Marketing Monday to see what was covered during Marketing Monday. Once we're done with that, we can discuss. We can talk about the things that were left out and the things that just didn't make it to the cutting floor. Let's start by looking at last week's Marketing Monday. The marketing reason why Elden Ring can't add easy mode.
On Monday, March 7th, let's talk about our topic. Why Elden Ring cannot add an easy mode. And it has everything to do with branding. But first, a little bit of background. Elden Ring just dropped last week to absolutely enormous critical success. It's been top of Steam, the largest FromSoft launch ever.
Top of Steam?
Truly a phenomenally successful launch. There's no disputing that. So let's go back in time for a little bit. Back to 2009. Now, some of you, I guess, were 2 years old.
Well,
we can go to this
rude.
PS3 Demon Souls, which was thought internally to be doomed. It had an uncompelling prototype, and no one else wanted to work on it. He wanted to work on it because he figured if I could find a way to take control of the game, I could turn it into anything I wanted. It began to get some cult following. People that played it actually find themselves liking it. That means it was able to stand out. And it paid off quite handsomely. So if you look, this is the sales figures for all their previous games. What I think a lot of AAA games have leaned into is almost Skinner-Boxian methods of getting humans addicted. Branding choices that it's made to be distinct are powerful. This made some developers angry, and this is developers from Ubisoft and Guerrilla.
Ubisoft and FromSoft have a really big history that didn't get brought up in this stream.
If Elden Ring was an Ubisoft game, you would have paid real money in their store to get the Stone Sword key. Whether or not that's true or not, it feels true.
No, because it absolutely is true. For modern Ubisoft, absolutely true.
Now we're talking about difficulty. Difficulty is one of the core parts of the FromSoft brand. It's what allowed them to really stand out from the pack. For a while, until maybe Elden Ring, which has sort of branched that, it was their main thing. They've leaned into it. It's been part of their ethos.
Yeah, and they've relaunched games with the branding of this is hard.
The main question people phrase it as is why wouldn't you just add, like, who does it hurt? Like, you don't have to use it. And you think about that, and I'm like, okay, on surface level, that seems fine. There are 2 things. One,
I guess,
is communal shared experience.
Well, we'll talk about
it being difficult
where
and being the
I maybe
same
slightly
for every
disagree
single person that plays it.
a bit.
That means if you and I both beat it, you know that we accomplished the same thing. There's a shared bond. It's a rite of passage in a way. Fewer and fewer shared
slightly
communal
different path
Everything's getting more
to
and more
the same
People don't watch
outcome,
the
right?
shows anymore. People don't watch
And
there
is a difference there.
When a big thing comes
because
out,
it's not
we
as
can
shared
all
of
sort
experience
participate together, it feels
as one would
like
expect.
you're part of it. Challenging provides reward. The fact that you overcame the challenge makes it that much more rewarding when you do. And I think
that is a true through line of their games.
And had the best moment of my life. It was better than sex when I beat that thing.
Well.
And adding an easy mode can really undercut that because we're not all that mentally strong. They wouldn't be strong enough to stop themselves from cranking the difficulty down. You know what I'm saying? It would be very easy for them to be like, in a moment of
that makes
weakness,
sense. That makes
make
sense.
the game easy. So those are 2 things.
Some games are like that, not all games.
Later, but I think is the downside. People who may not have a lot of other things they are accomplished or proud about, it can almost be like extremely important to them in that way. And this is probably the dark side of it. This is probably the downside. But this perception of difficulty allows them that feeling of accomplishment. What that creates with a sense of difficulty is scarcity. And as we've talked about in previous Marketing Mondays, scarcity is probably one of the #1 ways in the world, in all of branding, to create brand value. Downside of that is this. As the game has gotten more accessible, and there's no denying that Elden Ring is the most accessible of the games so far, it's actually added many ways that make it kind of a lot easier to beat. FromSoft fans still need that scarcity by getting mad at them for using summons or magic.
This is the
reduce the amount of people that
this is the thing where it's like
this is an actual
shared experiences where that breaks.
Scarcity is being reduced, so they need to gatekeep. They need to burn the excess product
because not everyone gets to everything the same way, right? You have Atriocs who never go and try to level up and then come back.
This example really. This pissed me off. No magic / summons, just katanas only. This boss
katanas are
easy
still amazing though in the game.
But for average low IQ Elden Ring players who have negative reaction speeds, it will be a filter. So while I think we should call this all out as cringe, I want you to understand that this is a bigger, more widespread phenomenon. and it's not just exclusive to gamers. And so I want to talk about what it's called the brand
widescreen
model.
Why'd you choose a white background, Atrioc? It didn't need to be white background.
To make sure this passes that test,
Yo, firing people, though.
Differentiated. Is it relevant? Does it matter to gamers? I think we've proven that it does.
It does matter to gamers.
Is it sustainable? We said we're always looking to improve, but in our game specifically, hardship is what gives meaning to the experience. So it's not something we're willing to abandon at the moment. It is our identity. And I think when you think about that, I think they understand. What's most important in the world of branding is identity. And so shout outs to him for going left when others went right, and shout outs to them for all the success.
Good job, Cage. Now let's talk about it. There's a few points that he brings up that I want to cover. First off, let's look at the graph that was used, but a little closer with the actual data. So the first bit of data I can find for any game is Armored Core 2, which is a game released in 2000 for the PlayStation 2. Metacritic-wise, 78, not terrible. Sold approximately 230,000 copies. You then have the same year, The Adventures of Cookie and Cream, 2008, same Metacritic score, but look how much more was downloaded, or how many more copies were sold. Over 1 million extra copies of the game sold. Now, here's where we see a shift. We have another Century episode. Ace is the name of the game. 2005. You'll notice, not a Metacritic score. In its lifetime, it sells approximately 254,000 units. Really only sold in Japan. So the reason that this game has such high first week sales and doesn't sell many copies is probably because it's limited by where it's sold. Finally, the release that really changes everything, Demon Souls. Demon Souls 2009 comes out. Metacritic score of an 89, the highest Metacritic score we see from Software so far. Only selling 39,000 copies in the first week. Not popular. People didn't think it would be a good game, but people got hooked. And approximately to this day, 1,700,000 copies of Demon Souls have been sold. And then you have what can only be described as the most popular series of games that From Software are making, the Souls series and Soul-like games. Just look at these compared to what they were doing from 2006 to 2009. See how huge of a gap that is, right? And it just skyrockets from there. You have the idea of Demon Souls that then transfers to Dark Souls. And it does really well. 5.5 million copies sold. In the first week alone, you have 250,000 copies sold for this game. That is more than any of the other games beside Adventures of Cookies and Cream in 1 week. None of them sold better than that in their lifetime, much less in the first week. So Dark Souls, they really have got onto something, and they are working on this grind, this idea, the same concept. Then you have a kind of split from the Souls series. You have Bloodborne come out. It's similar, right? It's a Souls-like game, but it's not Dark Souls. This majorly hits how well it does. We see that its sales numbers are way lower than the rest, but people love this game. It's their highest rated game so far, but it just doesn't do as well. And the reason is because they've built this brand for themselves. People hear Souls games and they buy them. And so this is their first attempt at taking something that's Souls-like and trying to really get it to sell. They knew it would work because it's still outselling every other game they're making, even at this time, right? It's outselling the games they're still selling in their other genres. But it stands out as their first attempt at recreating the Souls experience without the Souls structure. One thing I want to point out, Dark Souls 2 is the first game that we start getting concurrent users. And so Dark Souls 2, they had 79,000 people playing at the same time. We move on to Dark Souls 3. It has one of the largest copies sold they've ever seen. Approximately 10 million copies of the game are released. In the first week alone, they sold over 1 million copies of Dark Souls 3. This is 2016, really the rise of, I believe, social media's impact into the Souls series. You have Twitch streams starting to take off. You see this huge push from streamers. You see this huge push from having it on a platform like PC instead of exclusively on console. And so it really blows up. But Sekiro takes the idea of Souls into a completely new genre of gameplay. Once again, very highly acclaimed, not their best. They still, though, in first week, get 2 million units sold and have about the same concurrent users. It doesn't sell as good in the long run. Once again, you don't have the name Dark Souls, so of course you're not going to. But still, 5 million copies sold? That's insane. 20 years before this, they were barely selling 100,000 copies. We end with Elden Ring. These stats, you'll see there's an asterisk. The reason there's an asterisk is these numbers are so off. I made this 5 days after Elden Ring came out. So within the first 5 days, we know we have sold over 5 million copies. In under a week, we've sold over 5 million copies. Some outlets reporting that we were about to hit 10 million units sold. 10 million units in 1 week of a game being released is insane numbers. Literally their highest ever rated game, almost a perfect Metacritic score, one of the highest rated Metacritic games in ages. And this concurrent users on here says 819,000. This is wrong. Literally the night that I made this, that number increased to 900,000. Games don't get million current users in their first week of launch. It just doesn't happen. Atrioc talked about it a little bit in the video, right? We have the idea that there's this shared experience of success when you beat something, because it's not easy. You have to work for it. You grind for it, and then you can succeed, right? Which is super smart on their part, because it means that people are going to want to be able to beat it and then go to their friends the next day at school, or go to their friends the next day in the workroom and say, yo, have you beat the Tree Sentinel? Because I spent 7 hours playing against that Tree Sentinel. I only had 3 health potions and I didn't level up once. But Elden Ring isn't where they started with these unique things, right? We've already talked about how a lot of this is kind of in their history, right? We've seen similar things in Souls games. We've seen the note system. We've seen exploration, but they do things differently in this one. You have the largest exploration ever. You don't have the same grind of a Dark Souls game of walking an hour and a half to get back to your souls, to just die to the same boss. You now can do that super quickly. You now have the easiest to play, in my opinion, Souls-like game that has come out. And it is the most open world. You have so much to explore. You have so many secrets. This game for sure is going to outsell Dark Souls. I think it already has. But let's talk about their history, because FromSoft didn't just do the Souls games, right? We talked about some of their previous stuff, but let's talk about pre-Souls. Let's go back further than this chart went back. So 13 days after the PlayStation's launch, we see this game drop called Kingsfield. There were 4 total games in the game series. The last one was released in 2001. Many consider Kingsfield to be the starting point for the Souls series, right? A lot of people assume that a lot of the things that were in Kingsfield were the inspiration and building blocks for the start of the Souls series. We then have Armored Core for the PlayStation. Armored Core is their longest running series and their series with the most games to date. Armored Core started in 1997 and they released Armored Core games until 2013. There are 15 Armored Core games, so that's almost a game a year. Every single game had some form of multiplayer. From 97 until 2004, you have split screen capability and PlayStation Link capability. And PS Link was basically this cord that you would plug into one PlayStation and plug into the other, and you could play against people on a different monitor. It was like split screen, but 2 different games. Then in 2004, they allowed LAN play for up to 4 players. So as long as you were in the same LAN network, you could play the same game, join each other's game up to 4 players. Armored Core 2 had one unique thing about it. And this was the unique thing. Exclusive to the Japanese versions of Armored Core 2 was an online multiplayer feature. In 2006, Armored Core 4, releasing for the PS3 and Xbox 360, finally had online multiplayer, and since then, every Armored Core game from 2006 until 2013 had online multiplayer. But think about it, right? When you play Souls games, the first thing you think about in Souls games is, man, they're hard but fun. The second thing you think about is their unique, like, killing things to get souls or something like it to upgrade your character. The final thing that you think about in modern Souls games is that online play, right? Like, oh, some other person can come and, like, we can fight in our game. Or, like, I can get my friend to help me with this boss I've been struggling with. None of that happens without the Armored Core series. Now, let's talk about maybe my favorite game of all time. A game that Atrioc Marketing live on stream. The Adventures of Cookie and Cream is a milestone for From Software, sure, but a milestone for me. This game is one of the games that got me into game dev. For those that don't know, my first 2 degrees are game and simulation development. My first ever capstone, a full 3D game project. I was the head of design for the project. It is based on The Adventures of Cookie and Cream. Cookie and Cream is a game where there are 2 lanes. One player's Cookie and one player's Cream. And you have to, like, do this platforming and, like, puzzle solving to get to the end of each level, where you, like, meet back up. In the co-op version of the game, one player always is Cookie, one player is always Cream, and your goal is to meet up at the end of the levels. Maybe there's a door blocking your way on one path, so Cookie can't get through. So Cream has to find a way to launch an object to knock down the door. And it works super well for co-op. But then there's a single-player version of the game. A single-player version of a 2-named game? What? Yeah. You do the same thing, but instead of having your friend help you with the puzzle, you can switch back and forth between control, and they have an AI character control the other one to help you, like, get through things. Finally, there's a versus mode. You can race your friend in the other path, try to get the most points, to try to get past the most obstacles to get to the end first. So 3 very unique play styles coming out of one game. Think about Elden Ring. Think about all of the things that make Elden Ring unique. There are multiplayer features. We've talked about that. There's RPG features. We've talked about that. And there's so many different ways to play the game. You can play by yourself, single player. You can play co-op. Bring along a friend to help you beat those bosses you aren't very good at. And then you can go into someone else's game and fight them one-on-one, just like The Adventures of Cookie and Cream. The Adventures of Cookie and Cream bring the idea of one game with 3 play styles into life. Insane, right? In 2000. Do you see why this is their most popular game before the Souls games? Of course it was. It only makes sense. It only makes sense that this concept that they introduced in 2000 becomes the concept for future games. Now, let's get on to Ace. Ace is a mech fighting game that allowed players control mechs from, wait for it, 9 different animes. They got 9 anime robot franchises to license their characters for you to play in this mech fighting game. In Japan, the estimated sales for the game is 254,000. Like I said, Japan alone, that is crazy numbers for a Japan release. But because you have all of these characters from animes that different people will like, they are going to sell like hotcakes. It's one of their best-selling games up to this point, besides, once again, Adventures of Cookie and Cream. This game became a series. There were 5 games in the series, and this is my favorite part about the Ace series. The 3rd game's title was Ace, the Final. Designed and announced to be the final game in the series, only to have 2 more games released 3 years later. Man, They're really good at predicting the market, am I right? We have another game to talk about. Enchanted Arms. Remember how I said that it's interesting that a Ubisoft dev was hating on a From Software game? Notice anything about this Enchanted Arms cover? Did Ubisoft produce a FromSoft game? Enchanted Arms in America was in fact produced by Ubisoft. Now, Enchanted Arms is that last major time in my head that I can think of that FromSoft changed the game before Souls, at least 3 years before Demon Souls. It's a science fantasy role-playing game that was released in 2006. And if you know anything about gaming in 2006, you would know that we just have the launch of the Xbox 360. This game was originally intended to be a launch title for the Xbox 360, being pushed back a few months. Not only was it going to be a launch title, but it was going to be an exclusive launch title. Guess what? It did become an exclusive title. It was exclusive to the Xbox 360 for the first year of release. For the first year that this game came out. A year later, it is also released on the PS3. Like a lot of games in this generation of the console wars. And here's why that's important. Enchanted Arms, at least claims to be the first JRPG for the Xbox 360. It is the most JRPG-like game that they release. It's not like their previous role-playing game of Eternal Ring. This really is a JRPG. And a lot of people love it, but it's, once again, not that huge breakout game. Their huge breakout game, once again, doesn't happen for another 3 years with Demon Souls building their franchise to where it is. All of this was just to say, when you see people say that FromSoft really changed the market, they did. They changed the market majorly. They came up with concepts that weren't in gaming. They played around with multiplayer starting in 1997 and kept a 15-game series over 16 years, even testing out online multiplayer before it could be done in the entire world. They licensed content. They worked with Ubisoft in an RPG. What's Ubisoft known for? Their RPGs and a racing game, I guess. What we see from day one, From Software has been innovating this market. They nailed it with Elden Ring. Now, Elden Ring isn't perfect. I'm not going to say that. And I'm not going to say it's a fantastic game for everyone. Not everyone will enjoy it. But if you love gaming like I love gaming, it is a unique experience that you won't see in many other places. Because it takes these concepts that they've been working with since their foundation in 1994 and takes advantage of marketing and streaming and the idea that difficulty doesn't mean bad. This idea that people are going to grind for the things they want. This idea that people will have this shared, enjoyable experience. And that's why Elden Ring is one of the most fantastic games to come out in 2022. Appreciate y'all being here. Been Marketing Monday Outtakes. Bloop.